Hello guys, my name is Evans and welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial I'm continuing to look at the February-March 2017 IGCSE ICT paper 1-2. In the last video we ended on question number 12, and in this video we start looking at question number 13. Okay, so question 13 says a teacher wants to record the results of tests for each student in a spreadsheet. He sets test papers for both the theory T and practical P aspects of the ICT course. Okay, so part of the spreadsheet is shown below, and so you have the spreadsheets with your column headings and your rows like that. Okay, so you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I, J, K. There you have from 2 to 11. Okay, so you can study your spreadsheet if you want. There is no harm in doing that. I'll go straight into the first part of the question. It says write down a formula you'd use in cell K4 which makes use of the labels in row 3 where appropriate to add up the marks for the theory tests only. Okay, so notice you need only to add up for the theory tests. Okay, so the theory, this is this one, this one, this one. Okay, and you need to use a formula which is going to read through. Okay, so you take advantage of row 3 and you're going to read where there is T and you're going to add up the corresponding mark where there is a T. Okay, so one of the functions in Excel that you can use to do that is what is known as the SUMIF. Okay, so the SUMIF actually adds up a set of cells or a range of cells upon fulfilling a particular condition. Okay, so it is one of the most powerful or not one of the most, one of the powerful Excel formulas, so to say, that you can use when you have multiple data that you need to add up that actually is meeting a certain criteria. Okay, so what you need to do now is to find out what are you adding. First of all, so you are adding these numbers here. Okay, so what are these numbers? So let me just write the numbers. Okay, so the numbers to add are from B4. Okay, now notice since this is not going to change, so I'll use absolute B4 to absolute H4. Okay, so these are the numbers that I'm adding, B4 to H4. Now, what is the range where the condition is going to come from? The range for the condition is going to be, I'll write it where? Okay, I'll write it here. So the range which is in row 3 is going to be, if you want, you can say absolute B3. Okay, B3 to absolute H3. Okay, so what this means is that you are referring to a range. Okay, so this will be our range. Will this be our range? Okay, so we are referring to this one. They're both ranges, but this one is this one. Okay, now what is the criteria? Where are we? What is the value that we are supposed to look for? So the value we are looking for is either the T on B3 or the T on E3 or the T on F3. So this one doesn't matter. If you want, you can just say B3 and that will be fine, or you can say E3, absolute E3, that will be fine, or you can say absolute F3. Now this will work, these values that I've listed here will work only for row 4, only for row 4. When you try to replicate the formula, the absolute will not shift. So for example, if this formula was put here, okay, let's say we put this formula here. If we drag and drop these the values here will not change. So the value in this row, or in this cell, and in this cell, and in this cell, and in this cell, will always remain this. It will always remain this. It will never change. Why? Because we are using what is known as absolute referencing. So you should distinguish between relative referencing and absolute referencing. Okay? For a cell. Now, I brought it up deliberately so that you know why it would not work. It will work for this one perfectly fine. For this one, perfectly fine. But for the next ones, when we begin to replicate this formula, these cells remain always pointing to row number 4, okay, and it will always be this same value. So suppose this value was, let's say, 65, then this one will always be 65, 65, 65, 65, 65, okay, because we are using absolute referencing. So you need to identify which of the cells should adjust when you replicate the formula, which of the cells should be relative, and which of the cells should remain the same. Okay, so to do that, notice that for B you have the same value for B. This is column B. Okay, so where you have column B, when you replicate, you want the cells to adjust to B5, B6, B7, B8, and so on and so forth. Okay, so to do that, you will need to remove the absolute referencing for B. Okay, so for example, on this one, you need to remove this one. Okay, so that it just remains that. Let me just reduce my pen size. Okay, so that it just remains like that. The same for this one. You need to remove this one, so that for H, when you replicate, it will still be H, okay, but it will still be 3. Okay, this will make so much sense once I write the full formula, but I'm just trying to guide you so that you see what you're supposed to do. Okay, so this one as well, you can remove this one so that B can continue to adjust. Okay, remove this one, but notice that for this other one, where is it? This one, you can remove this one as well, remove this one, and remove this one. The reason, you want the value to adjust. Okay, you want the value to adjust for B, but not for 3. For this one, you want the value for E to adjust, but not for 3. So 3 remains the same. Okay, so I hope this is making sense. Notice also, let me say for which one now? For this one, which is with a 4, we need also to remove this one and this one, because we want it to adjust from B4. We want the next one to be B5, which is this one. Then we want the next one to be B6, B7. But if you have a dollar sign here, this one will always remain. This one will always remain. Always remain 4. But this one will continue to adjust. But this one will always remain 4. So we want a situation where it's B4 to H4, so that when we replicate the formula, this one in the next cell it will become B5, this one will become H5. In the next cell, this one will become B6, this one will become H6, and so on and so forth. But for this one, when you replicate in the next cell, this one will become C3, because this one will change. This one will become C3 $3. This one should not even change. Okay, let me just write the entire formula now. My body is just getting messed up, and I'm not even beginning to see where I'm writing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to erase all this stuff here, and I'm going to I'm going to right now so let's just yeah, let's just erase this, so at least you understand what I'm trying to say. So let's now just try to write this formula the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so for the first part of the formula, you're going to write SUMIF. This is too big. Okay, erase it. So you're going to write SUMIF, excuse me, SUMIF, and then you provide now the first value that you've been told. So notice here, not here, it's supposed to be here. You maintain row 3. So to maintain row 3, you need to have absolute 3, okay, which is this one you're talking about, okay, absolute 3. Then you have H absolute 3. Okay, I'll put up an Excel sheet maybe for this one just to help you understand better. Okay, maybe let me just do that just to help you understand better. Okay, so you have an Excel sheet. Let me just increase the size of this thing, or maybe I zoom in. Okay, that's better. Okay, so what you have, you want to add, for example, these ones here. So if you come here, let's say T total, you say equal to, T total is equal to, and then you say sum. Okay, so sum if, so adds the cells specified by a given condition. So sum if, sorry, okay, so it's supposed to be sum if, and then you specify the range. Now the range is supposed to be from B3, notice, all the way to H, but this one, in case I forgot one, supposed to be all the way to H. So now these cells are supposed to, this row 3 is supposed to remain the same. Row 3 is supposed to remain the same, but the cells themselves are supposed to adjust from B to H. They're supposed to adjust. Okay, so there are cells in between. So you have B3, you have C3, you have D3, you have E3, you have F3, G3, up to H3. Okay, so what you need to do, on the keyboard you can tap F4 at this stage. So this is how you can even do it in the exam in a practical paper. So just tap F4 on your keyboard, and this makes it absolute referencing. Okay, but we need B to be relative. Okay, so tap again F4, and this makes B relative, but row 3 absolute, which means it's locked to row 3, it cannot change. Okay, so that is for the range. For the criteria, you just need to select one of these. So you can select if you want B3, you can select if you want C3, and so on and so forth. Okay, I'm just showing you an example. But again, you want the row to be maintained. So tap F4 on your keyboard and make sure that B is the same. Okay, B should be the same, but rather B should be relative, but row 3 should be absolute. Then the sum range, which are the values that you're going to add, so it's from this one to this one. But the sum range, also make sure that the sum range, all of the values are supposed to be relative, because you want B to adjust and you want the cell number to adjust as well, which is the row number to adjust as well. Okay, and then just say okay and hit enter key on your keyboard, and notice that for T, 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 5, that becomes 25. For P, you can do the same. Just copy this formula and paste it here. Okay, so paste the formula, and notice that For P, it is 5 plus 5 plus 10, which is 15. Okay, which is 15. But for P, the value that you're supposed to add is supposed to be, so P is D, so you change that one to be D and hit enter key, and that will be perfectly fine. So this, it's easy to do it in Excel because you're seeing what you're doing. But when you come to this work here, this is the same thing that we're trying to do here. Okay, so comma, then you have B absolute 3, comma, then you have B4 to H4, rather H4. Okay, and close. So notice that B3 is this one where there is a T. So where there is another T is at E3. So where we have B3, we could have put E, not 3. Also, we could have put F. So we could have said F and then 3. These will still be perfectly fine, and you get your full marks on that one. So guys, in case you didn't understand this, please go back and go through this because it's very important. Okay, for the sake of time, I'll just go next to the next question. It says write down a formula that you would enter in cell I4 to calculate the average of Rajesh results. So in I4, which is here, we want to find the average. So we're going to use the average. So you will say average and brackets, then you pass the range. So the range is from, notice the range is from B4, which is this one, to H4. So B4 to H4. Notice that these are not supposed to be put in absolute mode, because if you put them in absolute mode, then when you replicate the formula, it won't adjust. Okay, so that is fine. Okay, next, describe how the teacher could format the average mark to 2 decimal places. Okay, so now you want to format the average to 2 decimal places. Let me go back here. So suppose this is the average and we want to format it to 2 decimal places. There are 2 ways that you can do this. Okay, the first way is that you can go on increase or decrease average. Okay, so not decrease average, but increase or decrease the number of decimal places. Okay, so in Excel, the increase or decrease are this one. So that is increase decimal places. So show more decimal places for a more precise value. So we're told that we need to make it to 2 decimal places, so you can either increase or decrease. So depending on whatever outcome the value is, if it had low or it has less number of decimal places and we're told to make it to 2 decimal places, then we need to either click there, and this is now 2 decimal places. If it came out as 3 decimal places, then we need to reduce on that. Okay, so you need to use the increase or decrease decimal places feature. Okay, the other one that you can do is to select the cell and format it. Okay, so select the cell, this one, and go to number and format it as a number correct to 2 decimal places. Okay, so this is what you would do. Okay, so the first one, you can say you can use the increase. Okay, so let's say use the increase or decrease decimal places feature. Okay, decimal places feature to adjust the number of decimal places to 2 decimal places. Okay, the next one that you can do, you can use the format feature by selecting the cell and format it to 2 decimal places. Okay, and there you go with your 2 marks. Okay, good. All right, so let me see what we have here. So that has been question number 13. Let's try to see if we can get question 14. So whether we still on question 13. So question 13 is somewhat a lengthy question, so let's just deal with this part. Okay, so it says the teacher wants the spreadsheet to calculate the student's grade automatically. Okay, so he needs to calculate this from the average mark of all the results for all the students. So the average mark is this one here, and from these he will need to calculate the grade. So suppose 68.5 maybe it's a C or a D or a B, then the formula or the spreadsheet should automatically give a grade here based on the calculations that the spreadsheet would have made. Okay, so write down a formula which should be entered into cell J4. So cell J4 is this one here, and we need to write a formula which should be entered in cell J4, and the formula is actually supposed to be a grade. Okay, so it should use the calculated average mark, which is this one here. Also, it should search for a just average mark in column N, which is this one here, and return the corresponding grade. So it compares what is in this column and returns or retrieves a grade to put there. Okay, so it should easily be replicated for other students. Okay, so what this means is that you should be very careful when you use your relative and absolute referencing, because this is where replication is important. So absolute referencing, so be careful when you do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to just remove some of this stuff here. It looks a bit not clean, so let me just remove this. Of course, I'll have to write down some of the stuff again. Okay, now we have so far talked about VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP in the videos that we've been doing in data analysis. And I know somebody, the first thought that somebody would come up with is to use the if statement by saying if, you can say if I4 is greater than, let's start with, let's say it's greater or equal to N11, then the grade is supposed to be A. Else, if I4 is greater or equal to N10, then the grade is supposed to be B. Else, now imagine I've just even run out of space here, and I've not even reached halfway through the formula. This is tedious. This is cumbersome. Okay, you cannot use an if statement when you have too many values like this one, especially when you've been given cells where you're supposed to select from. You cannot use if statement. So this is a non-starter. Okay, so just even remove it. You cannot do that. The thing that you can do is to use a lookup function. Okay, so the lookup function is going to look up either vertically or horizontally on your Excel table, and it's going to retrieve the corresponding match of the lookup value. Okay, so in our case, the data is arranged. We have more rows than columns, so this will need to use a VLOOKUP. Okay, so VLOOKUP is used when you have more rows than columns. Okay, when you have the data that is arranged, it's arranged going down. Okay, more rows than the number of columns. Okay, now what is the lookup value? The lookup value is this one. So the lookup value is I4. Now notice I4 is not going to be absolute referencing, because when we replicate, there will be a value here, there will be a value here, there will be a value here, value here, value there, and so on and so forth. So we need I4 to adjust to go to I5, I6, I7, I8, and so on and so forth. Okay, I would permit you, if you, for example, did something like this, this one would work out, yeah, because you are maintaining I, but you are adjusting this one. This one would work out perfectly fine. Okay, So we need the lookup value is I4, but then we need also to have the array, okay, which is the table array. Now the table array is this one. Now the table array won't change. So for this one, we need to lock it so that it becomes absolute referencing. Okay, so it is from absolute N4. Is it 4? Yeah, absolute N4. This is row 4. This one. To supposed to be absolute or it's supposed to be absolute or 11. I think. Yeah, 11 is the last one. Okay. So this is the one that you have as your table array. So it's absolute N4 to absolute 0 or not 0 or 11. Okay. And the last thing that you need is to find out which column must be returned. So from your table array, you know there are only two columns. So this is column 1, this is column 2. So the column that we want is the grade, and the grade is in column 2. So column 2 is what is going to be returned. And the next one is supposed to be okay, let me just do this. So this is what we're looking for, and we're returning column 2. The next one, whether we want to return an approximate match or want to return an exact match. Okay, now in our case we cannot use an exact match because what we have here is a decimal value and we do not have a decimal value. Otherwise this is going to return nothing. Okay, why? Because we do not have an exact match which is matching the average matches, the marks here. Okay, so you need to return an approximate match, and it will get a value that is close or in between the given values here. Okay, so in this case you return true. Now true is what is used to return an approximate match. So you can return true or 1. Okay, now to complete this, so your formula should look at something like this. It should start with an equal sign, of course, equal to VLOOKUP, and then you provide the lookup value, which is I4. Then you provide the table array, then you provide the row that must be returned, which is the column that must be returned, which is the column number 2, and then you return whether it returns an approximate match or it should return whether it should return a true of or 1. So provide in this case true. If you use a 1, it will still be the same thing, it will work out. And that is the solution for this question. Okay. All right. So I think for this question, let's see if there is another question. I think for this question I'll end here, and I'll continue in the next video with question number 14. Okay. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, to share, to like, to comment, and whatever. All right, so see you in the next video.